So you are not talking about a timeline for this humanitarian ceasefire. There's the report about Mr. Biden asking for 3 days from the Prime Minister, and then Mr. Netanyahu in his interview saying something like an hour here, an hour there. Is there actually something on the table that's being considered? I mean, without asking what exactly it is there something concrete being considered for a humanitarian pause with Israel?
I'm just not going to get into the specifics of these diplomatic discussions. I will just use this opportunity to say again that we are looking this in three different ways. The first, conditions being allowed to allow for the flow of increased humanitarian aid into Gaza. Two, conditions being created that will hopefully allow for additional and further release of hostages. And three, this happening in a way in which Hamas cannot regroup and re-strengthen itself. I think this morning in Tokyo, the secretary put it quite aptly when it comes to the various calls for a ceasefire that we're seeing from various corners of the world. That those who are calling for a ceasefire have an obligation to explain how to address the unacceptable result a ceasefire would bring, which is Hamas left in place, Hamas being left in place with more than 200 hostages, with the capacity and its continued stated intent of repeating its attacks from October 7th. Camilla, you've had your hand up. Sorry.
Thank you, Vedant, and welcome back. In addition to what the Secretary said at his presser this morning about what the U.S. doesn't want Gaza to look like, in the sense they don't want a reoccupation of Gaza, yesterday Mark Regev on NewsHour said that he believes that there will be a buffer zone, that there needs to be after what we have been through. So is that something that the U.S. is in agreement with in terms of the buffer zone? And I have one more on fuel.
I think given where we are in this conflict, I'm just not going to get into the specifics of what is on or off the table beyond just reiterating what the Secretary says, which is there are some clear, very finite points of view that we bring to this as it relates to reoccupation, as it relates to governance. We continue to feel very strongly that it needs to be respective and reflectful of the will of the Palestinian people, and that ultimately we are interested in seeing a Gaza that is unified with the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority. But beyond that, we're just not going to get ahead of this process as we continue to work in the day-to-day to address these immediate needs while also laying out a pathway for some longer-term objectives.
This one on fuel. An IDF spokesperson said last week that Israel will allow fuel to enter the Strip as and when hospitals run out and will need it. Does that not contradict what the U.S. is trying to work towards to get fuel into the Strip? Are you in agreement with that particular parameter which has been set about waiting for hospitals to run out of fuel before fuel can go in?
I addressed this a little bit yesterday. Obviously, fuel is incredibly important for hospitals because there's, of course, a dire public health need, but as we also know that there are a number of other activities or actions that require the use of fuel, whether that be the desalination of water, the distribution of clean water, wastewater treatment, and so on and so forth. So beyond that, we recognize that there is a dire need for fuel, and we are working around the clock with Special Envoy Satterfield, with others, with the government of Israel, with Egyptian authorities, donors, and other aid agencies to see what avenues are possible to allow further fuel into Gaza for the benefit of civilians. Go ahead, in the green. Yeah.
Thank you. Yesterday, during the briefing at the White House, it was said that the State Department is solely responsible for managing the list of Americans who are in Gaza and need to leave. When the Rafah crossing reopened, although the United States are not responsible for the list itself of foreigners, what is the criteria for defining who can or who cannot leave Gaza Strip regarding foreigners? And the second question, if possible, if the U.S. agree with this limitation, limiting the number of foreigners who can or who cannot leave.
There's an important perspective to remember here, and that is first and foremost that this is not a crossing we control. This is not a crossing in which we really have much input into whether it can open or close. The role that we are playing is providing the best information to our partners in the Israeli government and the Egyptian government of American nationals, American citizens, LPRs, and eligible family members who have indicated a voluntary desire to depart Gaza. And at regular intervals, the Palestinian General Authority's Facebook page for Borders and Crossings posts a list of which foreign nationals are eligible to exit Rafah crossing on a particular day. And when we see which Americans are reflected on that list, we do our best to get in touch with them and ensure that they are able to make their way to Rafah to exit. When Rafah is open, American citizens, foreign nationals who may have had their names published on a previous day's list, our expectation is that those individuals will still be able to exit.
Can the U.S. diplomacy somehow help to push even Israelis or Egyptians in order to put more names in those lists? From other countries.
We are continuing to work around the clock to ensure that Rafah crossing can be open as often as it needs to be, to allow for the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza, but also for the allowance of foreign nationals to be able to leave when they see fit. Lalit, go ahead. I think there's going to be a lot more on this, so I can come back to you later. Shannon, I think you've had your hand up. Go ahead.
Something you said about the Palestinian Authority a moment ago.
Yeah.
The Secretary's comments earlier today seem to be the strongest endorsement that the PA should lead Gaza. So is that the administration's view, and would that look something like pre-2006 or something different this time around? And does the PA's, their lack of popularity, does that raise any concerns?
So I think just to reiterate what I said to some of your colleagues, I'm not going to get ahead of this process as what this is about and what the Secretary's comments were about. We're laying out some longer-term objectives and pathways that'll help share our approach in addressing some of the immediate needs. But what I can say is something that is not new is that we have long felt that the governance of Gaza and the West Bank, of course, needs to be reflective of the will of the Palestinian people. We believe that puts the region on a pathway to Israelis and Palestinians living side by side in states of their own with equal measures of security, freedom, and opportunity. And that continues to be our point of view. And you saw the Secretary reiterate that this morning in Tokyo. Jackson, go ahead. I'll come back to you right after that.
Thank you so much, Vedant. Has the State Department prepared for a possible government shutdown in 9 days? What's the department's reaction to the House GOP wanting to pair supplemental Ukraine funding with border security? Would that only undermine Ukraine?
We believe that there is an imperative to continuing to support our partners in Ukraine who are defending their country and protecting their territorial integrity and sovereignty. We also continue to believe that there is an imperative to support our partners in Israel who are defending their security and have every right to defend themselves. Beyond that, I am not going to get ahead of the process as it relates to a potential lapse in appropriations. Our colleagues in Congress, I have no doubt, are working around the clock to ensure that doesn't happen. But should we march closer to that potential outcome, we will take appropriate steps to ensure that this department, this building here, as well as our missions and our consulates and embassies around the world, can take whatever appropriate steps they need to.
And the new House Speaker, Mike Johnson, said in a meeting that he has said that he supports Ukraine aid. But so what is the department's reaction to this? Does this make getting supplemental aid through Congress easier?
Because he says he supports aid for Ukraine, you'd think that if the Speaker of the House says he supports aid for Ukraine, it would make that would be a good sign. But even Humaira, I answered two of your questions. I'm going to work through them. Humaira, go ahead.
But can I just go back to what Michelle asked? Yeah. Because I think he asked you if the United States believes that Israel and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you told him Israel has a right to defend itself, which is something that, you guys have said multiple times. But, and the secretary has asked his Israeli counterparts about the end goal, and you guys also discussed with them the plans to achieve that end goal. So I want to ask, does the United States assess that Israel is going to be able to achieve that end goal or not?
Humaira, I think again you are asking us to predict and look into a crystal ball about something that is currently ongoing. I think what is important to remember, and what this is about, and the Secretary spoke a little bit about this on the trip I believe that you were on, is that this is about defeating and dealing with Hamas in terms of dealing with it physically, making sure that it is not in a place to repeat or redo or attack again the people of Israel, just like it did on October 7th. I'm not going to parse into the specifics of this military operation, but there are track records and examples out there, Humaira, of the United States, of other countries, of coalition forces being able to degrade terrorist organizations to a point where their threat and their level of risk is not as much as it once was. And the best example I would give of that is how when we talk about the work that has been ongoing to degrade ISIS.
Right. Because the civilian casualties have been on the rise, I feel obliged to ask that. And when you say in a place that Hamas can no longer repeat October 7th, does the United States have a clear idea what that looks like then?
That is not for us to decide. We're not the ones carrying out this military operation. But again, we have long felt that Hamas is a terrorist organization. Hamas has used Palestinian civilians as human shields. It has used Gaza as a launching pad to attack Israel and the Israeli people. And so we believe that it's imperative that steps be taken to ensure that that can't happen again. Go ahead.
Thank you, Bernard. How long of a pause is the Biden administration demanding of Israel? Are we talking a few hours, a day, weeks, or months? And I have a follow-up.
So I just addressed this when answering Saeed's question. I'm not going to assign a time length or limit or longevity to our calls for a humanitarian pause. What our calls for a humanitarian pause are about are for allowing the conditions hostages to be released.
Okay, thank you, Bernard. Can you compare and contrast the two between a pause and a ceasefire? Because the lack of specificity is confusing.
Again, I spoke about this a little bit yesterday. I think it is less important to be focusing on the names here. I think a ceasefire, we believe, would allow Hamas to regroup and re-strengthen itself and allow it to carry out its very clearly stated intent of repeating the attacks of October 7th again and again and again. We believe a humanitarian pause will, our hope is allow conditions in which hostages can be released, in which aid can flow into Gaza, and simultaneously not allow Hamas to strengthen itself.Alex, go ahead.
Thanks, man. Non-Middle East related, if you don't mind.
I'm going to let Sam go, then I'll come back to you, because I suspect Sam's question is on the region.
Hamas? Sorry.
Not
please.
you also named Sam?
No, please. Oh, you said Sam?
Thank you. What's your distinction between, well, first off, there was breaking news about a Red Cross truck being hit, apparently by Israel. Do you have knowledge?
I don't get notifications of that stuff when I'm up here, Sam, but I'm happy to check. And
several hours ago, I think.
I don't have any specific updates on that specific report.
You accept Israel's premise that it is actually targeting Hamas and not the civilian population of the Palestinians in spite of all of this evidence?
We do. We accept the premise that Israel is undertaking a military operation to degrade Hamas, to target Hamas, and to do everything it can to hold Hamas accountable for its terrorist attacks on the Israeli people on October 7th.
The reports are of several over 10,000 civilians and
I'm
over
not-
4,000 children.
Sam,
How
I'm
many
not
Hamas-
disputing-
How many Hamas dead have they got?
Sam, I'm not disputing that there has been an immense impact on civilians over the course of this operation, that there have been an immense number of civilian casualties over the course of this operation. We have been very direct with our Israeli partners about the fact that there is an imperative to target Hamas terrorists and not civilians. And we will continue to raise that, and we have made so very clearly that we believe that there are additional steps that can be taken to minimize the impact on civilians. But your question was, do I take issue with their state?
Asking that at all. I was saying, do you accept at face value,
we have-
in spite of all of the evidence?
We have no reason to. We have no reason to not accept that Israel is undertaking an operation with a stated intent of targeting Hamas and degrading Hamas.
I know that's their stated intent. I'm just saying that the evidence of hospital after hospital and school after school undermines that, wouldn't you say?
Sam, we have been, this is not the first time you've heard me say this, we have been very vocal about the fact that steps need to be taken to minimize the impact on civilians. We recognize that there has continued to be an increasing impact on civilians over the course of this operation, and we'll continue to be very direct with our Israeli partners that this operation needs to and should be conducted in accordance with international law, and that there is a strategic and moral imperative to do so. But that does not change the fact that Hamas also is an entity that continues to use Palestinian civilians as human shields, that has integrated and co-located itself with schools, hospitals, and other critical civilian infrastructure. Hamas is a group and it's a terrorist organization that is bent on hijacking the political future of Palestinian civilians, and there is a clear track record of that.
I sent our exchange from Monday around to a series of international lawyers. I don't know if you're familiar with Richard Falk. He's a very prominent international lawyer, taught at Princeton for years, was the UN rapporteur. He emailed back to me, Gaza remains, from the perspective of international law and the UN, an occupied Palestine territory subject to the Fourth Geneva Convention. I don't believe that Israel recognizes the Fourth Geneva Convention for all of these decades. I don't know what U.S. policy is on that question. So that's one question. This means that Israel is an occupying power and has a primary obligation to safeguard the safety of the civilian. Its security in the aftermath of such an attack, referring to October 7th. As such, it has no international legal right of self-defense. Even if it had such a right of self-defense, it would have no legal or moral basis for engaging in a genocidal assault, the character of which has been strongly confirmed by Israel's top leaders. Does the U.S. recognize the Geneva Conventions as applying to Palestinian territories?
Sam, what I'm just going to say is what you've heard us say before, is that we believe, well, that's the answer that I have for you, which is that we believe wholeheartedly that Israel has every right to defend itself and to defend its security, and what happened on October 7th would be unacceptable to any country. And steps must and should be taken. Steps must and should be taken to ensure that those events cannot be repeated. Now, I've taken 3 of your questions. I'm going to work the room a little. Alex, go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, man. I have 2 topics, but before we dive into my questions, I want to ask if the department has any position on European Commission's decision today to grant 10-day status to Georgia, Moldova, and
Thanks for your question, Alex. We welcome this announcement from the European Commission on its recommendations on EU enlargement, and we strongly support the EU aspirations of the 10 candidate and aspirant countries that were recognized. This is, of course, as you know, Alex, an EU-led process, but we believe that this is a pivotal moment for the transatlantic community, and we encourage candidate and aspirant countries to seize the momentum to realize their full potential.
Thank you. Now to my topics. The arrest of RFR, the reporter. Now we are approaching to 1 month. National Press Club today came up with a statement urging the administration to immediately designate her case, her imprisonment as wrongfully detained. Where are you at these, and also any progress on your end to reach out to her in jail?
So, Alex, you've heard me speak about this before. As it relates to the formal wrongful detention designation that this department uses, that is an active and ongoing process, and it is not something I'm going to speak to in specificity to any particular case.
There is an obvious example you can give us to demonstrate that this actually is an ongoing process.
I'm not going to speak to these specific processes, but if you look at the cases that we have been public about their wrongful detention designation, they did not always necessarily start out that way. It is a process. Sometimes it happens incredibly quickly. Sometimes the nature of the detention evolves, and we will take this process step by step.
Have you heard back from the Russians formally in terms of this case?
I'm just not going to get into the specifics of the diplomatic discussions, Alex.
Because there's an impression that we're allowing ourselves to be paralyzed, to paralyze this process because terrorists of Russia, surprising part, is not cooperating. Is that the case?
I'm just not going to speak to the specificity of the process, Alex, but I'm happy to check back and get back to you.
My final topic on Azerbaijan, Armenia. Anything on Special Advisor Bonov's trip to the region? What is he hoping to achieve this time around?
When we engage on these issues, Alex, what we bring at the forefront is our desire and hope to see peace between these two countries and a durable peace in the South Caucasus. I'm happy to check to see if there's some specific information that we can share from his trip, though. Lala,
on Yemen,
okay, then I'll come to you. Go ahead.
The Houthis in Yemen claimed to have shot down a U.S. drone over Yemeni territorial waters. Are you aware?
I've not seen that reporting, and I would defer you to my colleagues at the Pentagon to speak to that. Lala, go ahead. And then we probably need to wrap shortly, guys.
Change of subject, India and its neighborhood.
Sure.
Secretary would be in India this week for the 2+2 dialogue.
Yeah.
What are the key issues to be on his agenda when he meets his counterparts in Delhi?
You've heard us speak about this before. India is a country that we have a deep partnership. This, of course, he'll be going for the 2+2 security dialogue with Secretary of Defense Austin. So I expect, of course, that deepening the security cooperation and partnership will be one of the many topics that are discussed. It was something that was obviously raised during Prime Minister Modi's state visit earlier this year, and I know the Secretary looks forward to being there and in engaging directly with his counterparts on this. But I'll let the trip take place before we talk more about it.
One more question on Bangladesh. Ahead of the elections, violence has increased in the country. I have seen a statement from both sides. The ruling party saying that those having ties with the Islamic terrorist groups are purposefully fomenting violence in the country. Ahead of the election, how confident you are of a free and fair elections in the country?
I'm not going to categorize or give the elections a grade from up here, Lalit, but you've heard us say this before, that what the United States wants for the Bangladeshi people is what we believe the Bangladeshi people want for themselves, which is a free and fair election, which are conducted in a peaceful manner. And we are engaging and will continue to engage with the government, with opposition candidates, with civil society, and other stakeholders to urge them to work together for the benefit of the Bangladeshi people.
I have a follow-up on this.
I'll go to you, then I'll come back to Sean, then we got to
Yeah, very short about 3C visa policy. I just wanted to tell you this is the third time in Bangladesh the general election is going to be held on time. It is very rare case in Bangladesh. For free and fair election, the US activated the 3C visa policy for Bangladesh to assist the election commission to conduct the election.
I'm sorry, do you have a question?
Yes, I'm just telling you that we are only 2 months away from the election. The opposition using political violence, arson, vandalism, killing armed police forces. And my question is that this 3C visa policy, when you will apply or I just wanted to make sure that USA will apply this 3C visa policy against the people that undermining the democratic election process in Bangladesh. Thank you.
I'm certainly not going to preview any designations or actions from up here, but again, our hope and our engagements are revolved around ensuring that elections in Bangladesh are free and fair. If you can keep it to 20 seconds, you can ask a follow-up on Bangladesh. Go ahead.
Yeah. on Bangladesh, already 8,000 over opposition activists is in jail, and three garments workers have been killed. I saw your statement for their minimum wages. And as USA does not support any political party over other, how does the US look? How does the US look at this scenario, the ruling party moving ahead for another one-sided election, and 2014 and 2018 election dropped out?
Again, I'm just not going to parse this situation specifically. As you so said, we do not support any political candidate or party in Bangladesh. Our hope, our desire, and what we continue to work towards and work around through our engagements with the government, through our engagement with opposition groups, civil society, and stakeholders, is that these elections be carried out in a free and fair manner. Okay, go ahead.
Yesterday, a local government leader of the ruling party in Bangladesh has threatened publicly to beat U.S. ambassador in Bangladesh, Peter Hush, due to his outspoken role in for free, fair, and credible election. Can you provide insight into the level of threat and security concern facing the U.S. ambassador in Bangladesh and the embassy personnel, and what specific steps and security measures are being taken to ensure safety and diplomatic mission in the embassy personnel?
So I'm going to address this broadly, which is that the safety and security of our diplomatic personnel and our diplomatic facilities is of utmost importance. I think such kind of violent rhetoric is deeply unhelpful. But beyond that, we expect the host government of any country to take all appropriate measures to maintain the safety and security of our personnel and our facilities. That is in line and per the country's obligations under the Vienna Convention and the diplomatic conventions that exist under that. Sean, you've had your hand patiently. Go ahead, and then we'll close up.
Sure, Sudan. Two things. I mean, first of all, there's the Jeddah talks.
Yeah.
I know that there's a statement from the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. I mean, I read the statement, but can you characterize it? Is there disappointment that it didn't go further? I mean, these are also confidence-building measures that have already been in the works for some time, and more specifically, there have been a number of reports of more violence, particularly in Darfur. Yeah. There's a communications blackout. I was wondering if the U.S. has eyes and ears somehow there to say what the situation is.
This is something that we're going to continue to work towards, Sean. The talks in Jeddah have remained focused on a narrow set of objectives to focus on the delivery of humanitarian assistance, establishing ceasefires, and to further and deepen confidence-building measures that we hope will result in a permanent cessation of hostilities. And this is something that we'll continue to work with the respective parties towards. I will also add, since you've given me the opportunity, the U.S. condemns in the strongest terms reports of killings on the basis of ethnicity by the RSF and its allied militias in West Darfur.
Just briefly, do you have more detail on what's happened in the past couple of days there in West Darfur? There have been a number of reports, but access is quite limited. So I wonder if the U.S. has some assessment about the level of violence.
We've seen reports of imminent large-scale attacks by the RSF on El Fasher, North Darfur. We've seen those reports also outline that there's subjecting of civilians to extreme danger. There's also extreme fighting that we've seen in Nyala, Zalangali, and elsewhere in Darfur as well, but I'm happy to see if we have any more specific updates. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.